You know what I think would help with some of this is a little more transparency. We need a little more transparency in government, need a little more transparency here in the United States, that sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Agree.
And so I thought maybe we should reach out to someone from Transparency International. Joining us now is Scott Greytak, Transparency International's U.S. Director of Advocacy. Welcome to American Ground Radio, sir.
Hey, good to be with y'all. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on. Now, you are very concerned, as I understand, about shell companies in the United States helping out drug dealing in the United States and a lack of transparency. What is this all about?
So basically, once upon a time, if drug cartels, including cartels in Mexico, wanted to move their dirty money and their drugs into the United States and be able to hide the profits from those drug sales, they would just take bags of cash and go into an American bank. But then a few decades ago, we came up with laws where now banks have to do certain anti-money laundering, certain background checks on anybody they have an account for, so that these criminals can't hide their dirty money there anymore. So what we've seen happening over the last couple of decades is that these criminals are now going to what we call the enablers of this drug trafficking, the enablers of crime. These are people who set up shell companies, like you mentioned. They're people who form trusts. They're people who manage wealth. Often these are attorneys or accountants who do these services. And the reason these criminals go to them is because these enablers, these folks don't have to ask any questions about who they're working with. Anybody can come into their office. They don't have to ask a single thing about who they are, whether or not they're under prosecution for drug crimes in the United States or somewhere else in the world. They don't have to flag any suspicious transactions their clients ask them to do, something that every bank has to do. And so it's a major loophole. And this is, my organization produced a big fact sheet about how this is accelerating the opioid crisis and how so many of these drug cartels are able to move these drugs into the United States through Chinese-run organizations, through Mexican-run organizations, because we don't have these safeguards.
I was actually going to get, because it really struck me that when we start talking about Chinese shell companies, that's kind of been in the news within the last couple of years. How prevalent is it that we have Chinese-run shell companies across the country?
Well, the fact is that these Chinese criminals know that they can set up these companies anonymously. So you think about a country that is an adversary of the United States, which is hoping to steal our intellectual property, steal our military capabilities, our military technology, our dual-use technology, trying to acquire land in the United States that's perhaps, close to important national security locations in our country. And they know that one way that they could wear some camouflage and be able to get away with this is by setting up a company that is anonymous. So it'll just have some kind of bland, innocuous title to it. And you'll never be able to know who is actually behind that company, who's pulling the strings, who's benefiting from the money that it moves around. They've been able to look at the U.S. financial system. A lot of these folks, this is, the Communist Party there. They have money. They have access to some of the best attorneys and accountants and advisors in the world. If they're looking for vulnerabilities in the U.S. financial system, they're able to get that expertise, that advice from them, and they've chosen to use these vehicles as ways of exerting their influence and undermining the integrity of our economy.
We're talking with Scott Greytak of Transparency International's U.S. Director of Advocacy. So, look, they're exploiting our laws. Congress is the one that makes laws. We got about a minute left here. Is Congress listening to you? Is there any movement in Washington to clear this up?
Absolutely. So a couple years ago, a bill called the Enablers Act, bipartisan bill, was led by Roger Wicker out of Mississippi and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse out of Rhode Island, came within one vote of becoming law. The House passed this. It was endorsed by the Republican Study Committee. It was endorsed by the Biden administration and the National Security Council. It's got an incredibly broad and deep bench of bipartisan support. The campaign is coming together again this year. We are doing everything we can from the outside to make sure that Congress puts this in our defense budget bill that they pass typically at the end of the year. So there's a real concerted bipartisan effort to make sure that the Enablers Act is included in that. larger defense package so we can finally plug these holes that are undermining our national security.
Scott Greytak, Transparency International's U.S. Director of Advocacy. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on American Ground Radio and for keeping an eye on this very important issue. We certainly want to stop enabling drug users and people who hate America. So thank you so much.